Welcome to Statistically Significant. We are sadly missing Anita today. Poor Anita. Anita, we miss you if you're watching this recording. That we're doing this without you. For those of you who haven't come yet, Statistically Significant is a UX research monthly discussion group. We keep it pretty casual. This isn't like a lecture or a keynote. Sometimes we'll have a guest speaker who does a little like presentation at the beginning, but for the most part, we just kind of keep it open and we let people in the audience ask questions and answer questions. And so if you're here, I hope you're okay with that. I may call on you. I love to see people with their videos turned on so we can get that visual feedback from each other as we speak, but no pressure there. Today, we are talking about the user interviews State of the User 2021 report. I can share out a link for that. But I thought we could talk through that report and see what people's reactions were. If you haven't seen it, you can probably do some Googling and find it more quickly than I'm going to share out the link, unless Juliet beats me to it. But we'll talk about that. That honestly will probably, I don't know, that may take up like the majority of the conversation because there's like 60 slides. So if we just go through it, that'll be like a lot of things to talk through. But we also had on the agenda pre-production discovery. Wanted to see if anybody had thoughts on how to do research when you don't have a product or users yet. If you're trying to do things, figure out key insights before you actually have a user base or have a product to work on. And then finally, and this one we almost definitely won't get to, we can talk about research repositories. A tiny bit of context for this event. We have been meeting for a few years now, but we just recently got adopted as a member of the Product Hive family. So that's sort of our home base. If you want to stay involved in this meetup, then recommend joining the Product Hive Slack workspace and joining the research practices team, which is where we kind of hang out for the most part. So yeah, that's that. So let me find the, looks like somebody posted this. Thank you, Juliet, for posting it. I'll go ahead and bring up the State of User Research 2021 report. Has anybody had a chance to look over this? I'm curious if anybody has seen this report yet. Well, we'll just sort of be going through it together. Seeing if there's any interesting things to talk about. Oh, also, I think we do introductions in the chat now. We used to do like introductions verbally, but we've gotten to the point where there's probably too many people to do that. So if you're new or returning, go ahead and drop your name and job title in the chat. Your LinkedIn if you want to connect with people. I think one of the more enticing reasons to join meetups groups is to build out your network. So to that end, go ahead and share out your info if you want to connect with people. So yeah, let's look through this report. 450,000 participants in 7 countries, 140 plus industries. Oh, here we go, responses. Okay, so it looks like there was 525 responses, so statistically significant. 68% identify as female or women. That's interesting. Skewed female. 52% 25 to 34. 44 different countries. I think skewed, yeah, skewed to the United States. 51% of respondents were from the US, followed by Canada, the UK, Germany, India, Israel, and the Netherlands. So good representation. 68% female, 20% male. Mostly white, 67% white respondents. Age skewing towards 25 to 34. And 50% with a graduate degree. How many people, I'm curious, how many people think it's important to, is this something that the UX research community thinks is important? I feel like with UX design, nobody really cared if you had a master's, but it seems to me that in UX research, I feel like a master's and a PhD are kind of more expected. Does anybody have any thoughts on level of education required to be competitive in UX research? No need to raise your hand or anything, by the way. You can just unmute and spew your thoughts. We're not to the point where it's become like vocally competitive around here. So feel free to unmute if you have any opinions.
More of a thought. I wonder if typically with a postgraduate degree, you've already done a significant amount of research. Not that it's the type of research that is particular to a specific industry, but you are very familiar with the practices. And so I would assume that part of that would be maybe driving that. I wouldn't say, I come from a product manager, more product manager world. I'm a group product manager at Bluehost, but the UXR that we have at our company, a lot of them do have postgraduate degrees. But it's a good question. I'll ask them.
Yeah, what I see another unmuting Lelbaum.
Yeah, hi. I'm the user researcher, one of the user researchers. Brandon is talking.
Oh, there's
about that.
Lauren, you answer that question.
I think it's more about the knowledge that you have than the degree. I will say that, with the degree gave me really specialized knowledge that an undergraduate degree didn't. So if there was like a way to get that knowledge outside of a degree, I think that would be okay as well. But right now it seems like a degree is the best way to get that skill set.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And with Brandon as well. Thank you both for your responses. This is a particularly salient point for me because I just literally finished my thesis defense yesterday. So congratulations to me. Yes, thank you. I will take applause. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I actually had, so back to the PM perspective, one of my early mentors said that he thought, this was when I was doing UX, he thought that getting a PhD was actually detrimental. He was like, PhDs are like too rigorous and too slow moving and too stuck in their ways and too opinionated. I actually think a PhD is like a negative thing. But I don't know. I tend to think that, I mean, when I'm looking over candidates, I think that a PhD or a master's is like just a clear indicator that this is like a relatively intelligent person, right? Like, so it's just kind of like immediately adds, I think, a little bit of credibility. That's kind of how I think of it. And then, yeah, back to what Brandon was saying, just the fact that like, especially if you get like an MS or you do like a dissertation in a relevant field, you're going to be doing like rigorous academic research, likely with some sort of like statistical analysis. And I don't know if that's particularly applicable to UX research. I mean, obviously it is, but like my team, we really don't do any statistical analyses, which is kind of, actually, that's something else that I'm curious about. How many, I know, well, I don't know. I don't know if I know the answer. Danielle, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Does your team do any statistical analysis?
Yes, but it's only because I know statistics.
That makes it easier.
Well, and I think sometimes I just tend to have a more quantitative approach to everything. But I've known some very capable researchers who didn't have graduate degrees. So I don't know.
Yeah.
For me, so I got a master's, and I like to say I failed out of my PhD in statistics. I mean, I didn't fail out, but but I quit. So yeah, and I think it's I think it helps ground you in what you should be aware of and how many things you should be aware of. What it also does, though, is it colors you into, if you don't have the practicum with it, you kind of approach things pedantically instead of from a real world analysis. I know when I, exited grad school, I had a perception of what business research would look like and how it would pair my academic research, and it comes nowhere close to that. So, and that's okay, but yeah.
Maybe one idea is that maybe those with graduate degrees or above are more interested in research type activity. Now, I know that's not a general case, but just a thought of when they say research, I'm assuming if you go to a graduate type degree, you do like the research academic side of the equation. And so maybe that drives more of that behavior.
I can talk about it a little bit from what I've seen.
Yeah.
So I work for Answer Lab. We're a UX research firm specifically, and Answer Lab requires their researchers to have master degrees. So all of us have masters, and then we also do statistical analyses, but we have separate quant and qual teams. So
Nice.
That's our setup. Although it does seem like they're starting to lean towards being more open to those that have done like some kind of boot camp or like other training. I think that just as the field gets bigger and those things get more successful and established, I think it'll start to change. My 2 cents.
Excellent perspective. All right, let's keep cruising. So mostly individual contributors, some managers, a couple of VPs and C-levels, a few directors. And it looks like only 2/3 actually have user research or UX research in their title. So more representative of other roles than I expected. But I guess that makes sense if like PMs and UX are doing research. Oh, and related to that, nearly 100%, only 1/3 are nearly 100%, 50 to 80% is another third as well. Okay, so still pretty significant research responsibilities. Cool.
What falls under research, I wonder?
Yeah, that's a
Like,
good
like
question.
communicating research too, or planning, or
Yeah, I wonder how that question was phrased. Like, is my job all research or no research? I'm not sure.
right?
Like, if I'm just doing people management for a research team, then is that none or everything? Funny.
Do they include maybe at the end the questions they asked?
They likely do. Let's see, just to show you my whole desktop.
I mean, it seems wise. Let's be real. The audience.
Well, yeah, the
Yeah,
audience.
exactly. We're researchers. Show
Yeah,
us your research.
Right, we want to see. Salary and experience. 1/3 in their current role for less than a year, close to half between 100 and 150. Over 1/3 work more than 40 hours a week. Oof, don't do that. Work-life balance. 1/3, 1 to 4, 1/3, 5 to 9. Current job. Drop off after 3 to 4. I was talking about.
Do a random poll of like how long people have been in their positions.
Should we do a really, really inaccurate poll? How many people have been in their current position for more than 4 years? I'm curious. Anybody?
At the
Nobody?
same company is what you're meaning.
Yeah, at the same company. Yeah. No, Ryan. Me and Ryan. Yeah. How is this detrimental? I mean, I feel like I've had good growth at my current role. So like my job titles are progressing, which is good. But I've been at Digicert for like almost 5 years now. Do you think it's a negative thing to stay at the same company for that long? I'm curious. I kind of view it as a negative. No offense to Digicert.
I think it's all about your personality type, honestly, Dave. I think, for some people, that's just what they want to do. They want to find a place they really feel like they fit in and where they get to do the kind of work they want to do, and they just stay there forever, and that's a great fit. And for other people, they want the variety that comes from working in a lot of different places. And I think, too, it depends on where you settle down. I mean, I spent the first 13 years of my career in the same company, but I had 6 or 7 different job titles, because I was able to progress and do new and different things. So I got the variety, even though I was in the same place. I worked in 2 different countries, 2 different states in the United States, so that helped, that I had that variety, but eventually it was time to move on even from there. So, I've got somebody on my team who worked at a previous company for 9-10 years, just, and it's partly personality type, just people who like to stay in the same place if they find something that works for them. So I don't know that there's a universal answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great perspective, Jan.
Yeah, I would second what Jan said, honestly. I was at my first company for 6 years and went through 3 or 4 roles or job titles. So as soon as I left, I mean, I took a huge leap when I went to my next company. It didn't really matter because I had all the experience. So it'd be the equivalent of, being a mid-level designer and jumping to a director at your next company. Because to me, it's either or, right? Like if you love the culture of a company, in my mind, there's no point leaving it as long as you have the autonomy to grow and the mentorship. And I think there's a lot of advantages. I've seen pros and cons where if someone's really young in their career and they go and try to pioneer on a very small team, like in a startup, a lot of the time it stunts their growth rather than increases it because they have no higher level mentorship to help them grow at an unprecedented rate, where I think hopping onto a good experienced team as a young professional will just jumpstart your career like no other thing can. But it's that pro and con thing, right? You can still learn. I think there's a smart way to learn and the hard way to learn, and you can learn either way. It's just what flavor you enjoy, and if you really like grinding and spinning it up, like you said, or if you really love a culture and you feel empowered, then just keep cruising, right? To me, again, there's no right answer, right? So
yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's such good advice. That really resonates with me. And I'm seeing a lot of like enthusiastic nodding. I think that if you're placed with a good team that's doing things really well, that just levels you up so quickly. Yeah.
Well, I was going to jump in and say for me that like my mentality is I like always work for companies that I love. I really love digging in and staying with them as long as I can. The only reason I ever leave companies is when like the opportunity for growth has just been like I've hit a ceiling and I'm just like, okay, there's nowhere for me to go. And I would love to stay here, but I can't move anywhere. So yeah, for me, like it like sucks that it requires like moving companies to change, like get a pay raise or like get a promotion in most of the instances where I have to leave. But yeah, I'm someone that loves to stay somewhere and I will stay as long as I can. But the limitations have just been, in my experience, that the company is like, we can't give you any further promotions. Like someone would have to like quit above you or yeah, for pay raise stuff. But
have to perform a coup, just take over this. Yeah, that resonates with me as well. I think like, yeah, for me, it's the same thing kind of where like, as long as I feel challenged and like I'm learning, like I'm getting the chance to progress and grow and stretch myself, and like I feel satisfied. But I do simultaneously, I do worry about the perception just because I hear pretty frequently that like, when you get to like a really long stint, people I think do wonder like, why are you at that job for so long? And like, there's good explanations. There's good answers to that question, but I feel like the question comes up.
So we've talked a lot about the advantages of staying, and what are some advantages of leaving? We've talked about, higher salary, higher position, more growth. Are there any other advantages to leaving that we haven't touched on yet?
Seeing different flavors. I almost always encourage new people that I hire. This is going to sound terrible because it costs me as their manager, but to come in and actually experience a few really good departments around and experience it early in your career so that you can experience the different flavors and be able to ferret out good and bad organizations. And so it always costs me when somebody comes to me that I'm managing, and because I support them in that, but it also means then I have to replace them, and that's unfortunate too.
I think like, I don't know, that approach to management, though, I think is really healthy in terms of like, I mean, you're going to have a great relationship with those team members while they're working for you, you know, if you really invest time in their career growth. So that's awesome. But yeah, to second what Ryan's saying, like, I think that for me, just like seeing how a different organization operates and the things that work and that don't work, this is kind of just echoing what you said, but that is to me the biggest benefit. Just how different like research responsibilities are assigned between like the BI team and the research team is like always interesting. What methods are employed and focused on, how they prioritize things, all of that, like, and being able to like, I don't know. I almost feel like staying at one organization for so long, I'm learning how to do things one way really well, but that's not the only way to do things, right? So I love being able to like at least be exposed to different processes. Yeah, that would be my thought.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it.
Oh, I just had a thought based off of kind of what Ryan was saying, and I think it's extremely valuable for people to have the chance to explore different teams and companies, not only to see what values they align with in terms of, if you think of product management, right, there's like sales-led orgs, product-led orgs, and kind of these visionary-led orgs, right? And kind of seeing what flavor you really resonate with early on in your career is really valuable. And the other thought there is, I've seen this happen a lot of, as I would define it, as Stockholm Syndrome with professionals, where they end up in a company and that's all they know, and they start to feel like that's the norm, or that's kind of the benchmark for the rest of the industry. And I say that because I stepped into a company, and after a few months, I'm like, wow, this company really stinks. Like, I don't align at all with anything that's going on. And it feels really oppressive almost. And then I would talk to younger designers where that's their first company, and they'd chat with me and they're like, this is the best company, you know, that I've ever worked for, and I love these guys. I'm like, how many companies have you worked for, you know? Because you can get into that Stockholm Syndrome in terms also of your value in the industry, right? Where I think Juliet was talking about this, about, you know, leveling up within your company, and at some point in time, typically you'll hit a ceiling, and that could be for a variety of reasons, right? Whether it's staffing or budgets, or, you know, whatever it is, team dynamics. But I've seen designers too where they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm getting paid this much and I feel like I'm being treated great. And I'm like, guys, interview with one other company and you'll find you could go 40% up from where you are, you know, and they just don't even realize it because they haven't taken the time to even look around, right? So
yeah, I always try and encourage people to, even if you're not looking for a job, just be interviewing. Stay sharp when it comes to like your interview skills, and stay informed as to what's out there. Danielle, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. All I was going to say is, as a chronic jumper myself, I start melting at 2 years, apparently. For me, it's the stage of business. I love this certain stage of the business growth journey. And once they grow up, I don't want to be there anymore.
You got to kick them out of the nest at some point, right? That's great. Oh, earnings. 100 to 150, 1/3 of respondents. 7. Wow, 12% making less than 25K per year. Albert, we got to get these people interviewing at other companies. That's not enough money.
Well, is this all full-time people?
That's a great question. I would imagine, I mean, 25K has got to be close to like minimum wage, right? Like, well, no, that's not true. That would be like 50.
No.
Yes, but still,
It's possible that some of these people who answered are students. And in that case, they'd be working part-time, so it would be less than 24K a year.
Yeah.
Non-US folks.
Oh,
On the second graph.
Good call. Oh yeah. Okay. Here it's broken out by region.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You see all the non-US is way skewed low.
Yeah, totally. Years of experience versus salary. Okay. Work longer, make more. Good. Hours per week.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. These aren't part-time people. 14% is less than 40. Wow.
I typically don't push over 40 hours. I value that work-life balance. I work efficiently for 40 hours a week. Research teams, company and team structure. Okay, key takeaways. 1/5 of researchers surveyed work at large companies with 10K plus employees. That's a lot. I've never worked for a company that big. They just starts at 1,500 and that feels huge already. Most common industries were tech, 30%, finance, 10%, health, 9%, and design, 7%. That's less tech than I would expect, I guess. Average number of dedicated researchers, 6 and 8 respectively. Yeah, it's a lot. We have 4. Does anybody have more than 4 researchers on their team right now? Anybody working for a bigger organization?
Yeah, Endurance used to be bigger, but now we're splitting up. So we used to be part with all of Endurance, so all of the Presence brands as well as Constant Contact, and I gotta make a count. We still talk to them, but they're not like officially part of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want to say 9 plus someone to recruit and an intern, although the person who recruited mostly worked for the Constant Contact side.
Nice.
But sometimes, oh, that's not true. They did a lot of work for Brandon, but not for me.
Lots of different industries represented. %6 freelance, okay. 40% enterprise. 18% startup. Post Series C, 11%. Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess I'm also surprised by this one just skewing big, but I guess more researchers work at bigger companies because bigger companies hire more researchers. So maybe that makes sense.
Also, the tech industry has grown tremendously in the pandemic, where other companies have not.
That's true.
Am I weird that I kind of saw a camel hump thing going on there?
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, not surprising based on kind of where the needs of a business at different phases, right?
Yeah. This is another thing I'm curious about. So I feel like I know Sam at MX, he's really like pushing for researchers as facilitators. How many people here have designers or PMs regularly conducting research at their org? Everybody, sort of everybody. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of that approach? Are there things you like about it, things you don't like about it?
It's a long conversation by itself, I suspect, but yeah, for us, it's just practicality. There's only 4 of us on our team, and we have enough research for more than that. So we try never to say no. So it's usually yes, but, and so it's yes, but you're going to have to do some of the heavy lifting. And so we try to stay in a review role. We try to make sure that we see anything before it goes in front of a consumer or a customer, but they may be taking first crack at writing a draft of a survey or a discussion guide or something. and they may be doing some or all of the interviews, for example, once we've got it lined up, just as a practical matter, just for bandwidth reasons. Downsides obviously are less direct control. You've got people who don't spend all their time doing research, so their quality suffers a little bit. In some cases, you sit in on some of those interviews and you kind of find yourself wincing a little bit from time to time. But on the plus side, more people get directly involved and exposed to the research, which is always a good thing, whether they're just observing or participating. You want research is much more meaningful to people if they've been a part of it. And so we try to make sure we have enough of a role in it to maintain the quality and to keep them on the right track and that kind of thing. And, they become advocates for it. They usually enjoy it. They want to do more of it. All of those things, I would say, are good outcomes from it. And they're learning how to do it better. That's the only way you can learn, is by actually doing it as well. So that kind of helps. So it's a mixed bag in that sense.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I'm seeing a lot of nodding. Sounds like it's similar experience. Yeah, it seems like you would struggle with like quality control and standardization. I like the idea of like those checkpoints, right? Checking in with the team to like confirm that the level of quality is there. Do you do any like training? Do you like try and coach people and stuff on like how to interview well, or?
Yeah. I mean, we have a weekly session called Research Friday on Fridays, 10 o'clock in the morning here, Utah time, runs for 90 minutes, which at first we felt one might be a bit of a stretch, but it's our whole innovation center is invited to it, about half attend. And we alternate between showing live and pre-recorded customer interviews, sharing out other research findings, and then once a month it's a training session. And so we do some training there, kind of just to do it very broadly, high level. It's not interactive typically because of the size of the group. We've got 100 people coming. But we also then, when we're working on specific research projects, we will do the first interview or two. We'll have them do the next couple, give them feedback after each interview, that kind of thing. So, it happens at a couple of different levels, and we're always trying to find ways to do it better. But that's kind of where we are today.
Very cool. Love it. Research Fridays. It's fantastic. Good internal branding. Research process, planning and recruiting. Over half of people said that their company does research at every stage of the product life cycle, from pre-design to post-launch. 6% of people are last-minute planners who start planning for a research session just a few days in advance. Nearly a fifth of people said they only ever do research with their own users. Well, we definitely do research at every stage of the product life cycle, but we don't last minute plan very often. And we also do like hallway usability sessions for testing of interaction patterns. When in the product cycle does your company conduct research?
David,
I feel like, yeah.
Who do you do the hallway usability tests with?
So if it's just to test the interaction pattern, then we'll just grab anybody who's available, which means pinging people via Slack. If we're worried about like conceptual knowledge, we'll grab people from the IT department who sort of match our like user. And then if it's like, I mean, there's like kind of a sliding scale between like, okay, we literally just want to know if this dot menu makes sense to the average person, versus like, is like the multi-year plan going to confuse people who are familiar with SSL certificates. Like, if it's just the interaction pattern, then it's anybody. If it's sort of halfway between those 2 points, then maybe the IT people will do. If it's the extreme of like, okay, we really need to know what the like customer's like mental model is like, then we'll book it with actual users. And I guess that's just usability testing. I think all other research we do with just users. Yeah. Everything else kind of like relies on an understanding of like our actual users, like behavior and attitudes. So all the other stuff we do. How about other people? Other people doing guerrilla user testing of any kind?
We have designers that will do it as often a first step, just to kind of gut check something that's brand new before they put it in front of consumers or customers. Kind of ask 3 people, what they think about something, get their first impressions. I don't know, to me, design is a process of whittling, right? It's like start super broad and you're trying to narrow down to the final solution. And often you can get a good chunk of whittling done with a very short guerrilla bit of testing, kind of like, oh, okay, nobody gets this, I've got to fix that, that kind of thing. So it can be helpful there.
How would you do guerrilla testing if everyone at your company is relatively tech savvy, because it's a tech company like Bluehost? I'm asking a question about me. When most of the people who are signing up for the product are brand new to technology or relatively new to technology.
That's a real challenge. Like, yeah, if the average person doesn't know what a DNS record is and everybody at Bluehost does, that's a challenge. Any thoughts? I'll open this up.
I mean, I think the whole point of guerrilla testing is just that raw kind of what's the right word? Like it's just really raw and broad. So something we've done before is when I worked downtown, we just went to the City Creek food court and just snagged people as they were eating lunch and whatnot. And that was an easy way to get like a really broad range of people who don't fit, like a specific knowledge bias or things like that. Another thing is, we try to look, even inside of a company, you might find a spread of tech savviness. Like we tend to look at things from the lens of like research, product, and design, perhaps. But if you maybe go to people in facilities or people in customer support, like different areas of the company, there's opportunities to kind of hit those as well. And really, Grill is fun because you could literally just march out the front door and go snag people. I mean, it's pretty accessible testing.
Yeah, we could do it more.
Have to snag people from 6 feet away with a mask on.
Hi, I'm not going to come closer than 6 feet, but can I shout some questions in your direction?
Can you see these designs? That's great. I've reached out in Slack communities too, right? Just I think there's a dedicated channel in Product Hive's workspace for recruitment that you could try. And I've also bugged friends and family as well, if you want to take advantage of relationships hopefully without hurting those relationships too much. When in the product cycle does your company conduct research? I feel like as the research practice at organizations matures, it tends to sort of go from usability testing outwards in both directions, where you get in usability testing seems to me like kind of the staple, right? Where no matter where I've worked, we always did usability testing. But as research practice matured, we went sort of before that to do validity testing, and before that to do exploratory research and feature discovery. And same thing was sort of afterwards, monitoring analytics and in-app feedback after things are launched. That's sort of something that has come with scale. One question I did have actually that I wanted to pose to the group was, how many UX research teams are utilizing analytics? Is that something that your BI team uses? How many UX research teams are utilizing in-app feedback? Again, is that something that another department is in charge of? Because at Digiser, we own analytics and we own in-app feedback, and we kind of use the analytics tool to target people for in-app feedback, but I don't think that's maybe typical. And I'm wondering if anyone wants to talk about how their organization divides those responsibilities.
I know ours, we use Pendo, and it is, what's on my camera here? It's mostly used by the PMs. The UX team is a little bit less familiar. It's definitely less a part of our design process. It's more of a kind of business and kind of PM consideration at this point, but we're trying to change that. Nice.
That's great perspective. Yeah, we use Pendo as well. Which I have a love-hate relationship with Pendo. I have a complicated relationship with Pendo. Anybody else? I'm just curious to hear a couple of perspectives on this.
Andy threw up in the chat that Adobe He says that I don't think any of our researchers are using site analytics or in-product feedback forms. So.
Yeah, maybe I'll just expand on that a little bit, Juliet. It's a bit ironic. We are like a digital experience and analytics company. At least the folks who are focused here in Utah are part of that business unit that sells Adobe Analytics, a Google Analytics competitor, but for large enterprise. And I think we find that the research that we want to engage in is like, we want qualitative insights. We want to know why people are behaving certain ways. And I think site analytics just doesn't deliver that. You're only, observing these broad patterns, and you just can't get the why out of the quantitative data. And as it relates to in-product feedback, our targeting mechanisms are not targeted. They're very generalized. And so the kind of feedback that we get most often is, don't give me the survey. So you start digging through your in-product feedback submissions and you find that there's so much noise, you just start to lose faith that you're going to discover interesting things there. So our research efforts are always like these one-off engagements that are planned and prepared, and they are essentially devoid of site analytics or in-product feedback.
So people who do use in-product feedback, how do you get around don't send me a survey?
So we pretty closely monitor all of our feedback. As it comes in, we send messages to Slack channels and direct it at specific relevant stakeholders. And when somebody complains about being surveyed, we just put them on a blacklist so they never get an in-app pop up again, right? We actually get a very low percentage of complaints about our in-app surveys. We don't do a ton of pop-ups. We have some persistent experiences that can be triggered by the user. And we do have a couple that pop up that are relevant to either the customer satisfaction in the app globally or feature specific. But yeah, when we do see one of those, we just remove that user. We try not to if no one's paying attention to the feedback, or if it's not important, we shut it down. So we try to be pretty targeted about where we use that, because you don't want to ruin the user experience in your efforts to improve the user experience, right? So you have to be careful about that, because it is annoying. I mean, you're getting in the way of their goal achievement. So you have to be really careful about where and when you use that. And ideally you don't have it just exist forever. How far in advance do you start planning a typical research session? 1 to 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. Yeah, we kind of fall in this middle area. I think that there's this honestly kind of depends on who the stakeholder is. I find that a lot of times how far in advance somebody reaches out to me depends on that individual. I'll have a couple of people who are like, hey, can you run a survey next week? And I have other people who are like, in the next quarter, we're going to need to do a little bit of investigation around this topic.
So is this across the board? Is this we need something that's a quick turnaround versus we need a discovery project that the interviews themselves will last more than a week?
The survey responses here, or
yeah, because there's different types of research that take different amounts of time to conduct. And I mean, I think that different research requires a different amount of planning. If someone wants a usability test that's going to last 5 minutes in user testing, writing the script doesn't take that long. So is it headway before, in 2 weeks we're going to want this, even if it only takes a week to do, or is it we want this big extensive project, let's start planning now?
It's a great question. I think they at least had the consideration to put typical in quotes here, which is nice of them. But yeah, I have the same questions you do. I'm not sure. I think that when I think of a typical research project, For me, like, I think that like typically we engage with customers. Typically we're talking about like 5 to 7 half-hour calls. Typically there's like about a week I need to like meet with the stakeholders, iron out the script, start to identify contacts, and then like a week to schedule and conduct maybe 2, and then like a week to do analysis. How far in advance did I start planning it? From like the finish date or from like it begins? Probably a week or 2 in advance.
I agree. Depends on the question you're asking, how complicated is the question, and then how much time oftentimes the business has to entertain that question before you've got to make a decision. I'm always struggling with what I'd like done versus what there is time to do before I have to make a decision. And oftentimes UX or researchers will come back and say, oh, we'd really like a month to run this. And I said, well, I'm going to make a decision in 2 weeks. So whatever we can do in there, I'm good, bad, or otherwise, we're going to make a decision. So, you know, sometimes that's the way it crumbles too. So, yeah.
You know, highly variable. What percentage of your user research sessions in a year are with your own audience? Customers, users, or panel you own or manage versus outside source participants? Oh, yeah. We almost never use a recruiter. We really rarely engage with like research firms. Is that something other people here are doing? I know that we had one person, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe like a couple weeks ago, a couple of like months ago, like 2 or 3 statistically significance ago, who was just singing the praises of utilizing recruiters. And it sounds like a great idea, but I just don't have any experience with that. Does anybody want to speak to that?
We've done it. We do it for really big, though, baseline kind of competitive market landscape research. So, you know, really understand, for us, we're in the lease to own space slash financial services. So we'll dump money to really understand how people are viewing their financial situation and use outside firms, because it would just take too many internal resources to really drive that big of a research pool to get a hold of. So yeah.
That makes sense. Just trying to understand the whole market landscape. Yeah, be challenging.
I'd say there's at least 3 places that we go outside our customer base. One is in surveys. So if we're trying to understand demand, interest, whatever in something, looking at our customer base isn't great because they're highly conditioned to be interested in certain things. So we'll go to Qualtrics themselves, which is our survey platform, and they'll get a sample for us, or we'll go to a Lucid or whatever and get it that way. So that's one. Second is we use usertesting.com for a lot of our testing of digital prototypes and that kind of thing. That by definition is not our customer base most of the time. Occasionally we find our customers there too, but that's not the intent, because we're often, again, looking for the unprimed consumer who doesn't have a huge grounding in the model that we're in and that kind of thing. So that's the second one. And then third, when we do, and we haven't done any for the past year, but in more normal times when we do kind of in-home research with people, our customer base is always a great base to go after because we see how they use our products, but sometimes we're wanting to get feedback explicitly from people who use a competing product or people who don't buy in the space, and we still want to be in their homes. And so we'll go outside, and that's the hardest group to recruit because, you know, we can't just pay a sample company or whatever. You can use recruiters for that kind of thing. Where before I joined Vivint, we used recruiters sometimes, and we've had mixed results with it. Sometimes it's led to really good participants, and sometimes it's led to the kind of people that just sign up for everything and aren't particularly useful. So we've preferred to do kind of social network recruiting there, just kind of using our friends and family as kind of extended networks to recruit people. We often do a screener survey to gauge that people really are interested in the space and have interesting things to say before we'll say there's an incentive and this is what we'd actually like from you and so on. And it's tough. It's definitely like pulling teeth to some extent, but it's led to some pretty good results sometimes still.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah, we use user testing, and we make sure that our screeners get us the people we want. And if we don't find them, we immediately stop. We also use a lot of recruiting within our customer base. And I'm not sure if it'll continue. We've been using all the customers from the other presence brands who might be interested, and also people from Constant Contact, which I don't know if the Constant Contact thing is going to stay. And then, yeah, I think that's it.
I can't remember who it was. One of our members wanted to set up like a participant sharing pool where you could volunteer people from your org to participate in other research projects for other statistically significant members. I think that kind of like fell through, but it still seems like a good idea. One thing we've done, because recruitment is a challenge for us, we do want to get better at it. That's one of kind of our goals for 2021 is to improve the recruitment process. But one thing we've done that I thought was a step in the right direction that helped out was we just sent out like a general recruitment survey. So we kind of listed all like the possible like features that might be relevant to test on like people on, and like listed some attributes that we might potentially want to segment on, and just asked people if they were willing to participate in future research projects. And we just kind of like launched that preemptively. So we had this like pool of people who had already said like, yeah, I'm interested in doing user research for you, that we could use to like contact when we went to send out like emails for, you know, booking interviews.
One thing one other thing that might help, David, we've been using Craigslist, and I imagine you can use Craigslist from like any city that you want.
Yeah.
And as long as it's like a digital interview. So yeah, if you're looking for like, you know, a specific group of people who want a specific type of SSL certificates, there's no reason not to post in like a lot of the major cities that your customers are in.
Nice. That's a great idea. I love that. I'm going to totally use that. It's fantastic. I did want to reserve a little bit of time. We've got through about half. There's like 60 slides, so I'm not going to make it quick. Absorb everything as I zoom through it. There, we learned it all. So you can go through the rest of that. Curious to hear, drop in research practices if there's anything that stands out to you or that you want to discuss next time. But I did want to reserve some time for just questions from new UX researchers or people interested in UX research who have any questions that we can kind of try and have some of maybe our more experienced people field. Are there any questions from the noobs?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
And also Brandon cannot answer.
Right, I'm muting you, Brandon.
Yeah. So recently there's been a push for a much faster turnaround in research, and it means cutting a couple of corners here and there, or qualifying the results in that, you know, if I'm doing a discovery project, which is what I've just been asked to do, you know, usually I think of discovery projects as anywhere between like 8 and 15 people to find a lot of patterns. But for the most recent project that I've been doing, I've talked to 6 people and only 5 of which really fit the criteria. And so I've qualified this as I can definitely give you like, here are things that are good, here are things that are bad, but I can't say definitively these are patterns because I've talked to so few people. So if I've seen one problem, like it might be a big deal, it might be a small deal, all I can tell you is that it's a problem. Same thing with a good thing, could be like a big success or a small success. I don't know how much of a success that would be. Similarly, another you know, usability test, I was asked to do that, but I wasn't able to get, you know, as much juicy stuff as I thought might be helpful, but it was more important that they get the results sooner to develop the product. So like, at what point do you push back, you know, and obviously it's like, use your own judgment, right? But like, at what point do you say, I think this data is necessary. I don't think it's necessary to continue.
Just tell them they're an idiot, Lauren.
No, I'm not going to say that. And
Brandon,
I think it's fine. Like for this one, I'm fine with it.
I love this problem, and it happens everywhere. You're not alone in the world. All right. So, and I think what I coach my teams to do is first make sure they have a clear understanding of what problem I'm asking them to solve. And then the second will be, if we get it wrong, what are the risks? So if I put pressure on my team, which I do from time to time, probably more than they would like, what I try to be is open of, well, if we mess it all up because I didn't give you the time to do it, what do you guys imagine will go off the rails? And then how bad is that? And if you can articulate that back up clearly to say, well, if I got another 23 people in here, I'd be more or less confident in the discovery effort. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. But the more you can help quantify for silly executives the risk, it will go better for you.
That's great advice. Anyone want to add to that?
No, I just had a question to, well, I guess kind of add to it, but just to further expound on it. What do you guys use as like the threshold for discoverability, like the number of people you're interviewing? Because I've been aiming for like 5 to 7, but no, way too tiny. Okay, I'm doing it wrong.
Definitely, that's way too tiny. Because here's the thing, like 5 to 8 is good for a usability test because of that graph that we've all seen in grad school. That's like, diminishing returns after 8. Well, really diminishing returns after 5, but like, go ahead and throw a couple more in if you really want to. Because you're just gonna iterate on it, and there's going to be more stuff. So like a small number is fine because you're just going to get another small number the next time. So for usability tests, like A+ for 5 to 8. But in terms of discovery things, like I would say like the absolute minimum is 8, and even that's usually too small. And you want to think more like 10 to 15, because you want to have like a more broad spectrum of who the customers are, and they could have many different facets that you might not be aware of. Like I can only speak of my projects, but if you give me examples, I'm happy to elaborate on yours. So for example, if you're doing like a persona discovery project, you want to have probably around like 20 or so people, maybe 25, because, we've got small business owners, we've got e-commerce people, we've got bloggers, we've got web professionals. We want to make sure we get a perspective from all of those people to really accurately reflect the audience. And so with a really too small of a sample, you can't see that. And similarly, seeing the nuance in a lot of other groups, like I did a recent study on people who chose the category other for what type of website, and then again, they chose for store. And so I saw people who were, they were running their own business to sell classes online. They were running their business as like a high traffic blog. So they're not really a store, but like they have an affiliate link. So they link to things. So like maybe they're kind of doing it. I saw people who were, personalities who wanted to sell their own swag. And so if you cut it too small, you just don't see the whole audience.
Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Mine was just like a very, very small feature specifically that I was doing discoverability on. And we only had like,
oh, yeah. You said discoverability, not discovery. I'm sorry. Someone else please answer.
Oh, no. Sorry, no.
Actually, I think that was great information still, but we better cut it off. No, I think no, that was great. That was a good answer. I think the question is important. Like, as Jan said in the chat, we could probably define discovery in this context, but that will have to wait until next time because we are at the hour. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It was great to see all of you. Hope to see you next time. Again, we'll post this in research practices. So if you want to stay up to date, join that channel in the Product Hive workspace. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend. See you next time.